I would just like to start by asking some general questions about background, about your family, about your parents. Tell me a little bit about your parents. Are they Alabamians? Were they from Alabama?
For the most part, my mother came from Georgia. My father is an Alabamian. And I was reared in Alabama, so to speak.
Yes. Were you born in Birmingham or in Alabama?
I was born in Dolomite, which is now part of Birmingham.
Okay. How many brothers and sisters did you have?
There were 4 boys and 4 girls.
And where did you fit in all of that?
Well, I was the 3rd boy. And let's see, out of the 8, I guess I must have been the 5th.
So you were home right in the middle.
Right in the middle, correct.
Okay. Tell me a bit about your parents' education.
My parents had a little education, what you might say a little education. My mother stopped school early because she had to work in the fields with her parents. She stopped at about the 5th grade, and my father was about the same. So that's as far as they ever got an education. They didn't pursue any farther than just what they had accomplished up to that point.
Right. And that was not unusual for that
time?
No,
that wasn't unusual. It was one of those things where people had to work in order to survive, and that came first, and you go to school later if you have any time, or the family can fit you into the program.
Absolutely. What about your occupations of your parents? Did your mother work outside of the home?
My mother did the domestic type work. She would wash and iron for the physician who delivered me and some of the other whites in the community, because we lived on a mining camp there in Dolomite, and my father worked in the mines at Woodard in that same area.
So you then would have been a rather stable family at this time. Your father working, your mother at home and working. You had a large family, of course.
We had a large family. She was working because it was out of necessity that she had to work. As I recall, the house that I remember when I was very small was one where you had no more than 3 rooms. And everybody had to do whatever in order to keep things going.
Right. And you lived in Dolomite?
I lived in Dolomite until I was 9 months of age. That's the time when my father lost his eyesight in the mines. And after that, my mother couldn't shoulder all the responsibility. She had 2 first cousins who did not have children. And they came out, she said, and they saw me as a baby, and one said, I would like to have him. She said, well, you may help me to bring him up, but I will not let you adopt him. The same thing happened to 2 of my sisters. This was 3 sisters, neither one had children. So that's how we got separated from the others in the family, but I was the first one to leave home at the age of 9 months.
Okay, so you then lived with your aunt.
It was my mother's first cousin.
First cousin?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
2 sisters, children they were.
All right. And where did the other children go?
One went to Lynch, Kentucky. The other went to Baxter, West Virginia. But I went to Birmingham.
Okay. Did you see each other periodically?
Yes, like at Christmas time and some of the other times when we as blacks would normally take vacations and visit relatives. They tried to keep us as close as possible so that we would know exactly who our parents were. They told me at an early age who my parents were. And I would make visits out to Dolomite on weekends when I didn't have to go to school. I would ride what was then known as Summers Bus Line. After riding the transit system, the trolley cars we had in Birmingham, I would go to Fairfield and I would catch the bus and go on to Dolomite to see my father and mother and the other brothers who were still at home.
So there were 5 children still left at home? The
yes.
3 of you
yes.
and the 5 left with
yes.
your mother? Okay. So what community then did you live in Birmingham?
I lived in the Smithfield community.
Can you describe to me what it was like growing up in Smithfield?
It was very rugged because the roads were unpaved, and in front of my house there was a ditch, and now that's all paved and the ditch has been covered and no sidewalks or anything like that. And that's the time when everybody would go barefoot during the summer months and put your shoes on if you're going to church. You didn't dare wear them every day of the week. Right. It was a kind of rough life because at that time we had the WPA and we had food stamps that helped us to survive. And that's when I really realized what food stamps were all about, because we'd get those commodities that had written on them not to be sold. And even some of the clothing that we had to wear, my mother, in as much as I was living in what they call in town, she would take the clothing that my other brothers would get and give me the ones that did not have the not to be sold written on them. Across the front of the overalls you have that not to be sold. but she gave me some of the jeans, as we call them today, and that's what I would wear so as to not expose and let everybody know that we were one of those in need of such service.
Right. Now, this is during the Depression?
Yes, that was during the Depression.
Okay, so then that probably was not that unusual to see people with that.
Oh, no, it wasn't unusual. Those were the days of the brogans when everybody wore them in order to have something that would last a long time and to keep your feet warm, because we had real snows then, and it was nothing unusual at all.
You started school at Graymont?
Graymont Elementary School. They had a Graymont, which was for whites, the one that's not in use right now, and then we had the Graymont, which is now Hill School. Okay. So that's why I got my elementary education.
Yes. Tell me, what do you remember about Graymont, what is present-day Hill School?
Well, it was one of those where we didn't have all of the facilities like they had at the white school. We had outdoor toilets, and the boys would have to go out and get coal for the pot-bellied heaters that we'd have in the classroom, and the floors were those that had to be oiled. They were not waxed, and sometimes if you wanted to get out of class, you would ask the teacher to let you go out and help to mop the floors, putting that oil in them. It was something of an experience.
What do you remember about your teachers?
My teachers I remember quite well because they were quite serious about what was going on as far as trying to get an education over to you, letting you know the importance of the same. We had home economics for the girls and manual training for the boys, when we had one room where you learned how to sew some of the items like pants, and you made a suit at the end by the time you graduated. And I learned some shoe repairing, and that was quite an experience to learn more than what they're allowing teachers to teach now in the elementary schools.
So it was more of both the academics as well as the trade.
Yes.
Yes. Now, you had mentioned that your father lost his sight when you were a very young child. Did he remain at home with you?
Yes, he did remain at home, and he did something that was illegal. And everybody who knows me, when we get into a conversation about it, I tell them, yes, my daddy sold booze. You know, but with him being blind, the county officers would let him know it was okay as long as he didn't go too far, and they would let him know when they were going to come around and inspect to find out who was running a shot house, so to speak. But that's how he brought in extra money, selling booze, cigarettes, candy, and peanuts to assist my mother in what she was able to bring in. That's why we also left where I was born and moved into what they call the boarding house, which was furnished by Woodard Iron Company for people who were not able to buy their homes or to pay rent, so to speak.
Part of the company housing.
Yes, yes.
Right? Yes. So Woodward had company housing on the, I guess that's the north side of Jones Valley as well as the south side of Jones Valley.
Exactly.
And you lived on the north side.
Right.
When you finished school at Graymont, where did you go?
From there, I went to Parker High School.
Parker High School. Parker High School, of course, is very well noted.
Yes.
What do you remember about Parker High School?
The thing I remember most was going out for the football team when I really didn't weigh enough, but I wanted to keep up with the gang.
How much were you weighing at the time?
I was weighing about 125 pounds. And that was a bit light for me to be wanting to play on the line, but I did make the team, and that's why I played during football season. And after that, I went to the band, and I would play in the band as well.
And you became quite an accomplished musician.
Yeah, that's why I got my start as far as being a musician. Working under Fess Watley, he taught me the ropes, and I ended up working with him as the first orchestra. And I learned how to value the dollar and how to not let it go as fast as you would normally without having someone give you the guidelines that you need.
Fess Watley is very well known.
Oh yes, all over the U.S. Yes.
Tell me something about Fess Watley. What was it like being a protege of Fess Watley?
Well, Fess Watley was a man who looked out for everybody, be they male or female. He'd let the boys know that there's a time when you don't put your hands on the girls. You go into your classes where you're supposed to be going and don't play around. There's certain things that you don't do, and you give them the utmost respect. And that's something I believe everybody remembered. And the girls would respect you also because of that. And he taught everybody how to be thrifty, you know, working with him, and not just be the regular run-of-the-mill type individual. Punctuality as well, because I'm reminded of that sometimes now by J.L. Lowe. He says, you came along during the Fess Watley era, you like to be on time or before time so that you will not be classified as one who comes late.
That's important.
Yes, very definitely.
Yeah. What was your instrument?
clarinet and drums.
Was Fess one who was a stickler for time and for precision? I mean, in terms of the development of, I remember when I grew up, Parker's band was always, meticulously dressed, and they had all kinds of precision. But of course, this was after Fess Whatley's time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, how did he set the foundation for what Parker would eventually become?
Well, he reminded everybody that they were supposed to be in uniform at all time, because we did have uniforms then. And along with the uniforms came your personality as to what you were supposed to be about and how you're supposed to carry yourself. And he was that man who was concerned about everything being as it should be. I remember we'd have band practice in the room above where the printing shop was. If someone made a bad note, he could come right upstairs and go to that individual who made it without having to be told who it was. He had that kind of sensitive ear as far as music goes.
You said that the band room was above the printing
It was
shop.
above the printing shop there in that boys' building, as they call it then.
Okay, and he would be down in the printing shop?
Yes, yes.
Was he the instructor for
He was the
printing?
instructor of printing, yes.
Oh, I see. Did you take that class?
No, I didn't. I didn't take printing. I took tailoring under Melvin Caswell at that time.
Okay. Who would be would Fess Whatley be one of those individuals that would sort of set an example for you? Well, I guess we would today call them role models.
Very definitely, I would think so.
Were there others that you would remember that were teachers at Park at the time that sort of stand out in your
Well,
mind?
Gus Ward and Melvin Caswell, who I mentioned earlier. I remember those quite vividly because I worked with Melvin Caswell as a musician, and Gus Ward was one who would take care of the finances for the school. He would take money to the bank, and I had classes in the carpentry shop there, and I learned quite a bit from him, as far as mannerisms and what you should be about as a male student.
You lived in Smithfield at the time, teenage young man growing up in Smithfield. What was it like?
It was like I think we needed to be now. There were certain times when we had to be off the street without having a curfew. Everybody was somewhat fearful of the policemen. Whenever they'd come by and see you standing on corners, they'd tell you, okay, it's time to go home. And they didn't have to tell you but one time. The next time they came by, you would start moving before they had a chance to tell you anything. Because 9 times out of 10, you were just there, not necessarily waiting to rob or steal or do anything like that. But you knew you were supposed to be at home and not hanging on the corners. And we didn't have as much crime then as we do now because of these things.
Was the police looked upon by your community as being there to protect and serve?
I think so, to protect and serve, and they were fearful of some of the things that would happen to them if they were not going down the right paths, as far as right and wrong is concerned.
Right. Were there ever any situations in your community where the police became an adversary to the community?
I don't recall.
After you finished high school at Parker, what did you do?
After finishing Parker, I went to Morehouse. Like some of the people are still doing today, wherever your friends go, that's where you want to go, you try and go there. So I did, and the money that I had from having served in the U.S. Navy was what I used to go to Morehouse. And I was working with a friend of mine from Ensley, Valentine, who was a musician. I played a few gigs to make extra money, but when my money ran out, and I had gone on the road with an orchestra, I heard about scholarships being offered at Alabama A&M University. It was just Alabama A&M College at the time. So I came home and I was lucky enough to get a scholarship, and I went from Morehouse to Alabama A&M, where I graduated.
So you say you went to Morehouse on the GI Bill?
No, it wasn't the GI Bill. I paid my way.
Okay, but you had gone to the Navy
Yes.
prior to
going to Morehouse.
Tell me about that your experience in the Navy.
Well, it was something that I thought I wanted because I volunteered. I didn't like anything about the Army, so I knew I had to volunteer for the Air Force or the Navy. There again, some of my best friends were volunteering for the Navy at the time, so that's what I did. I had never been to California, so I was glad to get that long train ride to California. That was quite exciting. And to get there, first time being that far away from home, was also something new.
Was this directly out of high school that you joined the Navy?
No, it wasn't directly out. It was during the summer months.
Okay, so you finished up in May.
In May, yes.
And you were around home most of the summer.
Yes, I was.
And then eventually.
Hmm.
What was that transition like then, from a high school senior to a sailor?
It was quite interesting, but not as much as I had thought it would be. Because I felt that I was missing something. Those were some of the questions that I was asked when they asked me, what will you do if you get out of the Navy? Because I left on the basis of having headaches that were so severe, I felt that I couldn't handle everything that I was supposed to be handling. So they asked, what would you do if we let you out? I said, go to school. And that's what I was aspiring at that time, to get into somebody's college.
So how long did you spend in the Navy?
A year and 6 months.
A year and 6 months.
Mhm.
So then off to Morehouse. And
Yes, off to Morehouse.
After Morehouse, then your money gave out.
Yes.
So then you went to Alabama
Then I
A&M,
went to
and that's
Alabama
when you
A&M
finished
when I
up.
had a scholarship, yes.
Right. Did Alabama A&M have a band similar to the one that Alabama State had?
It was just getting started back because it had been years since they had had a band. That was in '47 when I got the scholarship and we started the band. We got new uniforms and everything that they did not have to pass on down to somebody else. So that was quite interesting and a new venture as well.
Right. So you then graduating from Alabama A&M about 1950?
45. I mean, no, from 1950 at A&M, yes.
Yes. What did you do after graduation?
After graduation, I started working at Carver High School in Gadsden. And after working there, that first year, I started going to the University of Notre Dame, working on grad courses, furthering my career as an English instructor, since I had majored in English at A&M.
So you were going to Notre Dame
Yes,
during
English
the summer?
and speech, yes, during the summer months.
Okay. Now, Alabama had a policy where if you were going to graduate school, you could not go to the graduate school at the University of Alabama.
That's correct.
But they had a situation where they would actually pay for your tuition out of state. Was that the way that you went to Notre Dame?
No, I didn't get any assistance there from the state per se. I got it through the priest at the parish where I belong. It was Immaculate Conception, better known to most people as Immaculata, the high school. And Father Lawler assisted me in getting a fellowship to the University of Notre Dame. That's how I was able to go there.
How many summers did you go?
I went there 2 summers.
2 summers. And then did you remain at Carver?
I stayed at Carver 4 years until I finally got back home and got a job here in Birmingham.
And what did you do in Birmingham?
I started working at Council School in Ensley.
Elementary school?
Yes.
Okay. What area? Were you English?
No, it wasn't English. I couldn't get into my field. I got into something where I'd had quite a bit of experience and they felt that I could handle the job. I went in as a social studies teacher and band director.
I see. And how long were you there?
I was there for 4 years.
And what did you do after?
After 4 years, I had a run-in with the men in blue.
Oh, okay.